this is the Provoked Prawn, and here I'm comparing two excellent Razer mice, the Razer Viper Ultimate and the Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro. Now it might make more sense to compare the DeathAdder V3 Pro with the Viper V2 Pro, but I've unboxed and reviewed both the mice separately, so I'll leave links in the description to that. And I want to talk about the Viper Ultimate, because at one point it was the ultimate mouse, at least from an ambidextrous standpoint. So you're a left-handed or right-handed gamer, or just somebody that likes to use their mouse in either hand, then the Viper Ultimate was an interesting option with a number of really good highlights that included its own little dock on the underside for the dongle, some pretty decent specs and other things, but it did have a low light of a micro USB charging cable, which most people would turn their nose up at, and some other things that made it interesting, including this RGB charging dock. So a dock that has a little RGB ring around the bottom of it, but allows you to drop the mouse onto it to charge it up when it's not in use. Now it had up to 70 hours of battery life and some other interesting specs that included optical sensors and switches and programmable buttons, up to 8 programmable buttons with 650 max IPS and 50 Gs acceleration. But the DeathAdder V3 Pro is interesting because it shed a lot of weight, so it's lighter at 63 grams for the black one, 64 for the white version. It has a 30K optical sensor, so 30,000 max DPI, which is insane, and it has better specs under the hood as well, with 70 Gs max acceleration, 750 IPS, and Gen 3 optical switches. Now, Razer has taken the DeathAdder and changed it by making it lighter, more ergonomic, and also dropped some of the features. So it doesn't have a charging dock, for example, but it does have a 2.4 gigahertz capabilities and a high polling rate. I've gone into more depth on all these things in the reviews, but you can see there's some significant differences. The DeathAdder V3 Pro is basically just for right-handed gamers, but it does have a really nice ergonomic shape to it that's larger and fits nicely in the hand and delivers some really good gaming thrills, and it is one of the better mice from Razer in my opinion, and a very nice one to use. Also, as you'll see when you look at the shots and the differences between them, there are some subtle differences, like there's no RGB lighting on the DeathAdder, for example, but also those side buttons stick out a lot more. I'll leave a sound test at the end of the video so you can hear the differences between the switches, but as I said, both of them use optical switches, and I found them both to be responsive and nifty too, although I will say that I definitely prefer the DeathAdder for its button layout and the logic of it. They're more comfortable. They don't have the sharp edges that the DeathAdder previously had. It has a better fit in the hand and a more satisfying button logic. The side buttons stick out a lot nicer, as you can see here, so they're easier to access. I found that on the Viper Ultimate they were a bit too flush on either side, which made them difficult to press. This did, however, have the benefit that you weren't accidentally activating them, because that's usually a problem with ambidextrous mice. But you'll see responsive tactile wheels, not particularly quiet, but comfortable to use. Now, the DeathAdder shed a lot of weight, and that was one of the highlights of it, but you could also stick on this extra grip tape if you needed, because you obviously don't have the pre-installed, sort of applied grippy areas that you've seen on the Viper Ultimate. So they've sort of taken some of the highlights away, but then allowed you to put them back on if you wanted to. And I actually think that the grip tape they've included makes this mouse look even angrier, and yet it doesn't really add any extra weight, so it's a nice addition if you want it. However, you could say that the Viper Ultimate has its own style, obviously grippy on both sides thanks to that sort of texture logic on the edges there, and a more convenient setup with its own charging dock and those capabilities. However, the DeathAdder V3 Pro has a longer battery life in theory, although there's no Bluetooth capabilities, so that's worth bearing in mind. I'm going to leave all the specs in the description, as well as links to see the full reviews on both these mice so you can find out more about them. But the DeathAdder V3 Pro is definitely my favourite. It's not as convenient, but it is more comfortable, easier to use, and has a lot more specs to it, which make it more appealing in a number of different ways. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Stick around now for a sound test to compare the two mice. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.